Hello, I am Horrorama, and today I have found 4 intriguing stories and experiences that multiple people have posted on various subreddits. But before we begin, I did want to ask you that if you end up enjoying my narrations, then please do consider liking and subscribing, as that really does help the channel a lot. And also, if you have any kind of experience or story that you would like to share and have it be narrated on this channel, then check out the subreddit in the description below. But either way, without any further ado, let's get into the narrations. The first story is imposed by user embarrassed_list865. Back in 2009, when I was in my early 20s, I'd often go on late night walks with a friend. We lived in a seaside town in the UK, and our walks would take us around the outskirts of the town and past a big estuary. We only drank at weekends, and these particular events took place midweek, whilst we were stone cold sober. We set off from my mom's house around 9 p.m, and after walking for 30 minutes or so, we stopped to pet a cat. We were beside a building that had a big glass front. I was stroking the cat when my friend said, "Holy hell, that's creepy. Look in that window." I glanced up, and there was an old man sat bolt upright in a chair at the back of the room in complete darkness, just staring outside. We watched him for a short while, and he was completely still. My friend even pondered whether the guy was dead. We eventually moved on, and after that, our night got even stranger. We made our way past the town's dump, out through a close, around the town's boating lake, and down towards the estuary. It would have been nearing 10:30 p.m. at this point. We wandered past some really lavish houses that overlooked the estuary, and then arrived at a narrow wooded lane that goes right down. Normally on this walk, we'd just ignore this lane and keep going past the houses to the top of the road and back into town. But on this night, we decided to wander down to the water's edge. As soon as we set foot in the lane, it immediately got darker due to the tree coverage on each side. The only source of light was at the end of the lane. We were completely silent, just trudging down the lane, and the feeling was horrible. Just cold and apprehension out of nowhere. As we got to within 20 yards of the water, we both stopped at exactly the same time, without communication. I was staring at a shape that I could make out down the bottom of the lane. At first I thought it was a signpost, but as my eyes focused, it seemed to look more like a broad figure with a big head that stood about 7 to 8 feet in height. I was trying to rationalize in my head when my friend broke the silence and said, "Do you see that thing down there?" I replied with, "Yeah," and without any further communication, we both turned around and dashed back up the lane. It was only 20 seconds or so until we got to the street, but the whole time, the back of my neck was cold, and I felt like I was being chased. Once back on the street, we began talking and walking, thankful for the streetlights lining the pavement. Apparently, we both had not only seen the same thing, but we also felt the cold sensation of being chased. We remarked on how, without communicating, we both instinctively turned tail and got out of there as fast as possible. We both described seeing the same eerie shape of what appeared to be something bipedal and absolutely massive, shrouded in darkness like shadow. Yet there were no shadows down there because of the tree coverage. It was almost blacker than a shadow, if that makes sense. There was like a density to that dark shape, like a void. We went back to my place and watched South Park to wind down. My friend then left, and I insisted on him texting me when he got home, which, as two young men, is something we never did. Now, I had an appointment at a mobile retinal scanning clinic the next day. This happened to be taking place in a car park next to the house we saw that old man in. I went to this appointment and met up with another friend who lived nearby. As we rounded the corner, I glanced at the house, and it was completely empty. No furniture or anything. I mentioned to my friend about what I'd seen the night before, and she said, "Well, that's weird, because my mom used to clean for the old couple that lived there, but they both died a few years ago, and it's been empty ever since." The next story is posted by user R. For context, I am an engineer by education and profession, and have always been a bit of a skeptic with regard to paranormal experiences. However, my wife, Elle, is very interested in the topic, and much less of a skeptic. That said, there have been a few things that I guess we, have experienced, which I cannot explain. The most dramatic or hard to explain thing happened when we went on a hiking ghost tour in St. Augustine, Florida in September of 2022. A month or two before going on this trip and tour, Elle had gotten a Reiki message followed by a tarot card reading. During said message, the masseuse commented that my wife was surrounded by an unusually high amount of energy. Subsequently, during the tarot card reading, she told my wife that she has, or had, a guardian angel follow her daily to protect her, and that this angel is the Archangel Michael. I just took it all with a grain of salt, and didn't really think about it much further. So on this walking ghost tour, my wife is wheelchair bound. It was just the tour guide, another couple, and ourselves. We were perhaps midway through the tour, and we were all in a narrow alleyway while the tour guide told us about the history of this particular alley when the event I cannot explain occurred. The tour guide had provided us all with various detection devices, and at this point we each had EMF readers. At first they were all basically silent, but a little while after the guide begins retelling the history of this alley, the EMF my wife was holding became very, very active, paying the gauge multiple times. However, the EMF I was holding, while standing more or less right next to her, was silent. Likewise, the guide's EMF detector was also silent. The other couple had kind of wandered off a bit, but came back to where we were at this point, and their EMFs were also silent, while my wife's continued to signal the presence of an EMF field near her. We then sort of began testing, and found our EMFs would go off as well if we got particularly close to my wife, and then silence again if we moved away, even just a foot or two. At this point, the tour guide, who was now using a spirit box sort of device, which I see as a sort of detuned AM radio that had just been static noise up to this point, asked, "Is there someone here with us?" And pretty quickly we all heard the word yes, and then it was back to static sounds. All five of us did in fact hear it. Note here that at this point no mention had been made about Elle's Reiki experience or Michael, her guardian angel. No one present other than she and I knew that story at this point. So after getting the yes response on the spirit box, the tour guide asked if the entity that responded as being present could tell us its name. Then the static stopped, and all five of us clearly heard the word Michael. Color me really surprised. Actually, shocked might be a more accurate description. After this encounter, Elle shared her story from the Reiki experience with the group, and a few moments afterwards, the tour guide asked the entity, Michael, are you here to protect Elle? A moment later, all five of us clearly heard the word yes come from the spirit box. Honestly, I was flabbergasted. I really didn't know what to make of that experience, and whether it was something that one of us somehow manifested, or whatever else. There was no way anyone else in that group knew about her guardian angel Michael experience. How did it happen? I have no idea, really, but I do know that it really happened. The next story has been posed by user Invalid Pineapple. I'm uncertain whether what I'm about to share in this post really happened to me, or if it was just a dream. Even if it was a dream, it felt so vivid that it blurs the line between reality and imagination. I'm quite certain my eyes were wide open when I heard these sounds. We moved into our new house in September. My room is on the ground floor, while the rest of the family resides upstairs. The first peculiar encounter occurred in October. In the middle of the night, a dog near our house started barking aggressively. We have many dogs around, and they often bark at night, but that particular night had a more intense tone. If you're familiar with dogs, you'll understand what I mean. The barking woke me up, and I was irritated. Since my room is on the ground floor, I could hear the barking quite distinctly. Then I heard what sounded like a toddler calling me from outside my house. I was wide awake at that moment, clearly hearing the toddler's calls amidst the background of barking dogs. I sat on my bed, listening to the child for about a minute, and then went back to sleep. At that time, I wasn't very frightened, but I felt concerned and a bit annoyed. I could only hear a child calling, not using a name, but babbling, trying to grab my attention. In my mind, I envisioned a child sitting on the stairs of my front door, screaming into the house. A few weeks later, in November, I suddenly heard someone call my home name in the middle of the night. I didn't open the door because my mother had instructed me not to open it at night, unless I was sure it was my parents knocking. This precaution was due to safety concerns, since I'm a girl living alone on the ground floor. The incident was not very clear, so I thought I had just dreamt it. However, last night around 11 p.m., I heard my mother say my name and knock on my door. I even heard the lock on my door move for a second, and then there was complete silence. I have a habit of not responding immediately at night. I wait for someone to call my name 2 or 3 times before I respond. I was so convinced that my mother was outside my door that I got up and sat on my bed, waiting for her to knock again. But she didn't. After a few minutes, I realized nobody was outside. Now, I'm beginning to question whether I actually heard my mother or if it was just another dream. This isn't the first time it has happened, so I am a little concerned. Even if there's something calling me, I have a feeling it can't enter my room or my home. In my village, they say you need to invite the entity, and they cannot enter without permission, especially into someone's home. I've read that knocking can be a sign of some spiritual meaning. If anyone has information, please do let me know. The next story is imposed by user sharp underscore mistake underscore 3119. Hey everyone, I would like to share my lifelong paranormal encounters and hopefully get some advice as to why things happen to me and perhaps how to stop it. So, I'm a 34-year-old man who lives alone currently, and strange experiences have been quite the norm all of my life. When I was a kid, I had so many instances of sleep paralysis. In my late teens, I had one really intense experience with astral projection, after which my sleep paralysis events faded away. I am by nature a very curious and open-minded person. However, I do not intentionally seek out these often scary experiences. When I was 25, I moved to a new state by myself after a traumatic life event and struggled with depression and alcoholism. This is where paranormal encounters were first experienced. I moved into a house with roommates that I found off of Craigslist and witnessed poltergeist activity, trash can falling over at night, cabinets opening and closing, personal items moving around or disappearing, footsteps and running sounds at night, etc. This completely freaked me and my new roommates out and led me on a spiritual journey. I also moved into a different house. However, the poltergeist events continued in this new house. The day I moved in, my new roommate's plates exploded in the middle of the night. His favorite socks went missing and reappeared 5 months later by the front door. A disconnected doorbell would randomly go off. My clothes would simply emerge in strange locations, and I could go on. During this time, I was so afraid that I went to a psychic who told me that no entity was attached to me, but rather I was sensitive to spirits and that I moved into two separate houses that were both haunted. That gave me some relief. Over the next year, I grew my faith in God, quit many addictions, went to church, went to counseling, and changed houses, which did seem to stop all poltergeist activity in a gradual manner. I then moved back home and closer to loved ones, and have generally enjoyed life since, and haven't had as intense of paranormal encounters. This brings me to the present day. I still occasionally witness strange things, and am baffled as to why they still occur. In my current home, on the third night of moving in, I heard a loud crash of glass break in the middle of the night, only to find nothing amiss in the kitchen. I also see hazy mists or distortions dart around in the corner of my eyes anywhere I go. This might be a health thing. I've also have had chess pieces fall over in the middle of the night. My bed randomly shakes at 4 a.m. Possibly another health thing. And the fuse box open by itself between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. However, I don't feel afraid, and I am happy in my current home and really feel unthreatened. These events are spread out over years, by the way, and seem to pick up when I'm anxious, or funny enough, when I increase my meditating practice to decrease my anxiety. Can anyone offer suggestions or advice as to why these events occur? Talking to some friends, it seems like most people encounter weird things, but just play it off. Maybe I pay too much attention to things? Also, is there any way to stop these from happening at all? Demons. That is just one of many names people have used to try and describe such creatures. No matter what culture of mythology you observe, all of them have myths of their own demons. Could this be because such creatures are just simple to imagine? Yes, that is a possibility. But let's be honest here. That's the most boring possibility. Anyone who dismisses folk tales and myths as just nothing but someone's imagination clearly doesn't care for seeing the deeper meaning of events happening in their life. Each and every story passed down through generations has some truth to it, some more than others. But either way, I do hope you enjoyed my narrations. But even if you didn't, I want to wish you a good rest of your day.